In this video I'm going to be reading through Caesar's De Bello Gallico 5.41 and as through the other video I'm going to be reading the Latin aloud. I'll be doing some bracketing and labeling, and then I'll be translating, so be sure to follow along. Rewind if you don't understand something and listen to an explanation again, or you can always email me with any questions that you have after the video. Let's get started. Tonc duces principesque neriorum qui aliquem sermonis aditum causam quae amicitiae cum cecarone abebat colloqui sese vela dicunt. Facta potestate eadem quae ambiorix cum titurio egerat commemorant omnem sese in armis Galliam. Germanos renum transisse, Caesaris reliquorum quae haberna oppugnare. Alright, so we started off Tonc duces principesque neriorum. This is just a series of nominatives and adjectives. So we have our subject. They could be accusatives at this point, but being near the beginning of the sentence, I think Caesar's probably going to start off with subjects here. And then we have, of course, our genitive right here with neriorum. We see a qui, which starts a clause. We put our bracket there. Aliquem sermonis aditum, which we are going to take as our accusative here, and a genitive sermonis in the middle. Causam, another accusative here, with this quae connecting causam and auditum. Amicitiae, another genitive. Cum cecarone, abebat is then ending our clause here. Okay. Colloqui we see as an infinitive. We have sese, vele, and since we have two infinitives and an accusative here, I think we have an ACI started, and dicunt confirms that as a head verb. So let's bracket that off there. Now, we have our accusative subject in sese. And of course, dicunt is the verb that goes with duces principesque neriorum. Okay, we keep reading. We see facta potestate, which I think is an ablative absolute. It is indeed, as we have an ablative noun and an ablative participle. So the whole thing is an a squared. Eadem quae. So we first see eadem, which is probably going to be neuter plural, and then quae, which starts a clause. Ambiorix cum titurio, and then agerat ends our clause, and then we see the verb commemorant, which not only is our verb, but it's one of two words that is our main clause. So here we have a verb, and in order for us to make sense, I think we need eadem to be a direct object here. Okay. Omnem esse in armis. So actually we can see with commemorant that we're going to be starting a series of ACIs immediately when we see omnem esse in armis Galliam, which is an ACI as well. Germanos renum transisset, and Caesaris reliquorum quae haberna oppugnare. Okay, these aren't overly complicated infinitives, but it does look like we changed tense as we read through these. So the first one, essays, in the present tense. We have in the black underline here, transises in the perfect tense, and we see oppugnare in the present tense again. So we have to keep in mind what's already happened and what is currently happening when ambiorix or when the nervi are talking to Cicero. Okay, so let's get started with the translation. Then the leaders and the chiefs of the nervi, who had some approach of speech and a cause of alliance, of friendship with Cicero, say that they want to talk. With that opportunity having been made, they recalled the same things which Ambiorix had, agerat here means to say, which Ambiorix had said with Titurius, who is Sabinus, that all of Gaul is in arms, that the Germans have crossed the Rhine, that the winter quarters of Caesar and of the rest of them are being attacked. Adunt etiam de Sabini morte ambiorigem ostentat fidei faciendae causa, arare eius dicunt, si quidquam abeis praesidi sperant, qui suis rebus diffidant, se tamen hoc esse in Ciceronem populum quae Romanum animo, ut nihil nisi haberna recusant, atque anc in vittorascere consuetudinem nolent. Alright, so we start off with adunt, our verb, right away. Etiam, connecting this with the last part in the last slide. And de Sabini morte is, of course, a preposition. Sabini going to morte as a genitive. Alright, ambiorigem ostentat, just a simple direct object with a verb. Fidei faciendae, now that shows me a gerundive going with fidei, and then we see causa, which we've come to expect with Caesar. So this whole thing, which I'm going to underline in red here, is one of these causa plus the gerundive constructions that we've seen many times, and it expresses purpose. Errare eos dicunt, just from those three words I can tell that we have an accusative with an infinitive here, because now we have our head verb dicunt. Then we see si right away, which is a clause marker. We have quidquam ab his, quidquam of course being accusative and ab his a preposition. Praesidii is going is a genitive, and it's going with quidquam here, and then sperant is your verb of the si clause. Although before we end the bracket of the si clause, we have to see that qui keeps it going a little bit, because that's a relative clause inside of that si clause. And suis rebus looks like a dative or ablative, and then diffidant, which of course ends our qui clause, and also ends that si clause that we started. Now if we keep going, we see se tamen hoc esse, and immediately we think we have probably an indirect statement with se and esse right there. And I think that's going to prove true. Here we have our subject and our verb. Now, interestingly, we have hoc here in the ablative. And if we keep reading, in Ciceronem populum quae Romanum, that's all going to be a preposition. We see animo here. So hoc modifies animo as an ablative. And it seems like we only have one part of a linking kernel, right? We have se here as the subject, we have our verb here with esse, but we don't have a subject complement, and that is because this ablative is an ablative of description, meaning it's technically it's not a subject complement, because that would have to be in the accusative, but it's kind of modifying to be as a, or actually it's kind of modifying se as an adjective, and that's why it is an ablative of description. So in a way it is actually kind of taking the place of a subject complement here. So we move on, we get started with this ut clause here, which is still technically part of this ACI that we started with se up there, because it modifies it, so we have to do an internal clause here, ut nihil nisi. Now, nisi should either start a clause or can kind of start a preposition, which I think is here, so it's kind of except for this, because we don't really have enough verbs here to start another clause, to be honest, and I say that because I read ahead. Recusant is our verb with ut, but then we see atque to connect another clause into the ut clause, so we keep going with hanc, which is accusative, and invittorascere is, of course, an infinitive. Consuetudinem, and now we have to think that hanc agrees with consuetudinem, because they're both accusative, and we see nolent, and that's our last subjunctive to end our ut clause here. But as we end that U clause, we have to kind of ask ourselves what nolent is doing, because it can take either a complementary infinitive, which is definitely present in case we need a complement, or it takes an indirect statement, which also takes an infinitive. So either way, we need that infinitive in weterascere, and I think we have to know what that means. It kind of is a verb that means to become established, and I don't think it's really as much of a transitive verb. So I think what's happening here is we actually have an ACI starting at honk and going through consuetudinem, because I think that that honk consuetudinem has to be the accusative subject of in weterascere. Okay. So now we have to also remember that we had an outstanding clause here with se all the way up top, and I think that it goes all the way through this guy right here. The U clause ends at nolent, but the se clause does as well. Okay, so let's translate now. They add thus, and we have to add in, gap in, whereby words about the death of Sabinus. They point to ambiorix for the sake of making trust. They say that they are mistaken if they hope for something of defense from those who distrust their own affairs. We continue with the dekunt as our head verb, and so we say they say that they still are of this mind toward Cicero and their own people, namely that they deny nothing except the winter camps, and they do not want this custom to become established. This word in weterascere literally means to make old, or to grow old, and you see the wetera root in there. Alright, and I think that for that reason it's almost, it's hard for this word to be a transitive verb, which we talked about when we did the grammar, so that's why honc consuetudinem has to be the accusative subject of that. Alright, let's move on. Alright, so in the fashion of ambiorix, it looks like the Nervi are trying to get the Romans to do largely the same thing that ambiorix was trying to get Sabinus and Cotta to do, and remember, ambiorix was successful, but not because Cotta wanted to, but because Sabinus wanted to. And I think it's important here to now see kind of the difference between good leadership and bad leadership again, where you see Sabinus in this exact same situation do the wrong thing. We're going to see Cicero here do the absolute right thing, and this will be good. You can kind of see how Cicero responds to this. And just note the same rhetoric. The Germans are coming. You have the idea that all of Gaul is going to start attacking all the Romans. It's kind of a big deal, even though it's untrue. He does tell them about Sabinus, though. It's kind of cool. Or the Nervi tell Cicero about Sabinus. And here in this passage, I think we're going to see that the Nervi are going to try the exact same thing, where he's going to say, well, you can set out through our land and we'll keep you safe. And it's the exact same rhetoric, remember, ambiorix used, where he could pass through his land safely so that they can go get help. And in this case, we're going to see how Cicero responds. So I guess let's start with some grammar here. Licere is our infinitive, of course. Note that we are actually in indirect discourse right now, because we are technically still having the Nervi talk to Cicero, so we are still an indirect statement. So this is probably our main verb here. And note that licere also takes another infinitive, so we're probably expecting another one of those. But then we see here illis incolumbibus. Incolumbibus is an adjective. It means like unharmed. and so it's agreeing with illis. We see per se exhibernis discedere. Okay, there's our other infinitive we were expecting with licere. This, of course, is a verbal noun infinitive because licere it's an impersonal verb. It takes a verbal noun infinitive. And then we have quascumque. We know that starts a clause. We see in partes. Oh, wait, quas agrees with partes. So we have to kind of extend the in backwards with quascumque included. I'll do that in blue, so it makes sense. But in is kind of our preposition there, even though it's a prep sandwich. So quascumque actually kind of agrees with partes in that way. Okay. And then wellant, of course, is going to end the quascumque clause. We see sine metu as a preposition, and then proficisci is another infinitive going, of course, to licere, another verbal noun infinitive. Okay. And then we have Cicero ad haec unum modo respondit. Cicero being the nominative here. Ad haec unum modo respondit. Respondit's our verb. Modo is an ablative. I almost wrote adverb there. It's an ablative. Unum is, of course, a do, the direct object of respondit. So we're good to go there. And then more indirect speech because responding is a talking verb. Non-esse, there's your infinitive. Esse being so close to beginning, I'm thinking that this is the existential use of esse, so like there is, or it is. And in this case, probably with non, it is not. Consuetudinem, we can kind of see the consuet, that at root, it kind of always means something to do with customs or things that are continually done. But in this case, yes, we have the accusative here, and it means like the custom. Populi Romani is, of course, our genitive. Romani is agreeing with populi. The genitive goes with consuetudem. Accipere, all right, that's going to be another verbal noun infinitive. It is the custom to do this. This is a verbal noun. A lot of verbal noun infinitives in this passage. Ab oste armato. Armato is technically a participle, used very much like an adjective here. PPP, enemies having been armed. And then conditionem is another accusative. All right. So we can pretty much just translate from here that it is allowed for them, the Romans, the illis, uninjured, to leave from the winter camps through the Nervi, and to set out into whatever parts they want without fear. Cicero responds one thing in this way to these things. That it is not the custom of the Roman people to receive or to accept a condition from an armed enemy. This is, remember, kind of similar to how Cotta responded to Ambiorix when Sabinus was like, wait, what? So Cotta and Cicero, the good lieutenants, kind of respond the same way. It's like, you are armed, you are an enemy, I'm not listening to you. And we saw Sabinus, of course, put his trust in the enemy, the armed enemy, and that was not a good idea. So here we have an example, again, of Cicero having good leadership. And Caesar is probably very grateful for this, because if Cicero were of the same mind as Sabinus, he would be losing more legions. So he's probably happy that Cicero is doing the right thing. And of course, this whole chunk of Book 5 is kind of showing you the contrast between good leadership, bad leadership. And of course, we're going to notice that Cicero is a part of a family back in Rome that I think is very politically important. So he's kind of going to, give Cicero some props, being related to Marcus Tullius Cicero. This is not Cicero the speaker up in Gaul. This is one of his family members. Let's move on. Si ab armis discedere vellant, Se adjutore iutantur legatosque ad Caesara mittant. Sperare pro eo pro justitia quae petierent impetraturos. All right. We have, of course, we're still an indirect statement from Cicero's respondent. Oops, sorry. So we're kind of remembering that he's still responding. So if we have an indirect statement, we're not going to be all that surprised. But regardless, we do actually have this this C clause here. Which is then going to have some subjunctives in it. So actually we are breaking for a second from the respondent, even though he is saying these things. The infinitive is actually going to be on here as sperare. But here we have a conditional sentence with C. Ab armis is, of course, our preposition there. Discedere is an infinitive. And vellunt is a present subjunctive. Now, it being a present subjunctive, we're starting to think that we have a future less vivid condition. Future less vivid condition. Now, these kinds of conditions are where you have a future subjunctive here, or sorry, not a future, a present subjunctive there, and a present subjunctive after the C clause. And how you do this is you kind of say, if ... something should happen, then blank would. So this is kind of the should-would condition, if that makes sense. You'll hear it in translation if you're still confused, but just note that you're kind of using should-would for these future less vivids. And remember, future less vivid is where you have present tense subjunctives in the C clause and in the main clause that the C clause modifies. Okay. So we have C ab armis discedere vellunt. So if, sorry, I'll translate in a little bit. Say is, of course, going to be ablative. We'll talk about why in a second, but we'll kind of have a hint here that audiatore is also an ablative. So these kind of go together. Note they're both nouns. This is more like a noun in apposition. It's in a positive. And then utor, we know utor takes an ablative. There it is, that's why. Okay, so we used him. Okay, so we have legatos quae. We're going to keep the clause going, or the sentence going with quae. Legatos is, of course, accusative. Ad Caesarem, another accusative, but in a preposition this time. And then mittant, another subjunctive verb. Keep that in mind. We have another subjunctive verb here. So this quae is kind of connecting the utor and the mittant. Okay? Cool. Sperare, that's our infinitive. Remember that that's still your ACI from the respondent. We're kind of gapping a lot here, but this is going to be a gap say because we're talking about, of course, Cicero talking back to the Nervi. So we have our kind of our accusative subject, our infinitive sperare, and then pro. Eius is genitive, so pro can't take eius, but justitia is an ablative, so we're good there. And then we have quae petierent. Petierent is, of course, a subjunctive for many reasons. One being that it's inside of another dependent clause. We have just so much dependency at this point that we're not going, or that we are going to maybe use subjunctives. You can argue that it's also a relative clause of characteristic, but we'll see about that in a second. And then impetraturos, that is, of course, gapping an essay because we are an indirect statement. Now, we're actually in another indirect statement after sperare, because sperare means to hope or to believe, a head verb, and then we have another infinitive, impetraturos essay. So this is actually another giant ACI, just like that after sperare. Okay. You'll note that quae here, being accusative, has to then be neuter plural, and thus it does not have an antecedent, which means that this clause here is a noun relative. And it is the do of that in petrotouros. Okay. Whew. That was fun. This is a crazy one. So, remember to listen for that future less vivid condition up there, and you'll hear it when I say the showed in the wood. It'll be good. And we kind of remember he responds that if they should wish to withdraw from their arms, they would use him as an advocate, and they would send legates to Caesar. Kind of gapping in, he responds that he hopes from his justice, Eios being Caesar's justice, they would obtain the things which they sought. Note the perfect subjunctive here, petierent. Because it has that ERI with the ending, right? Alright. That's it for Book 5, Chapter 41. I hope it was helpful, and stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be Book 5, Chapter 42.